Beloved child, do not move past this moment too quickly, because something has shifted in a way you cannot yet see, and the person your heart keeps returning to has been carrying words they can no longer keep buried. Pause here for a moment. What you are about to hear is not meant to frighten you or make you chase what is uncertain. It is a story of realization, timing, courage, and a conversation that has been quietly forming beneath the surface. Something important just happened around your soulmate, and after that moment, they began seeing you, themselves, and this connection from an entirely different perspective. There is a reason their thoughts became louder. There is a reason memories of you began appearing at unexpected moments. There is a reason the words they once avoided are now pressing against their heart as though silence itself has become heavier than speaking. My child, there are moments when a person can continue pretending that everything is normal, and then there are moments when one small event breaks the illusion completely. Your soulmate recently experienced one of those moments. It did not need thunder, an argument, or some dramatic scene. It may have looked ordinary from the outside. A conversation. A question. A familiar place. A quiet night. A sentence spoken by someone who had no idea how deeply it would land. Yet something inside your soulmate suddenly connected pieces they had kept separated for far too long. In an instant, they remembered things you said. They remembered how you made them feel when you were not trying to impress anyone. They remembered the moments when your presence brought a strange kind of calm into their life. And what startled them most was not the memory itself. It was the realization that those memories had never truly disappeared. There is more to this than nostalgia. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that some connections do not become meaningful because they are loud. Some become meaningful because they remain. They remain in the quiet spaces. They remain after distractions fade. They remain when another person asks a simple question and your name unexpectedly appears in the mind. They remain in music, in certain hours of the night, in familiar streets, in the strange instinct to reach for a phone and then hesitate. Your soulmate has been noticing this more than they wanted to admit. At first, they tried to explain it away. They told themselves it was coincidence. They told themselves they were simply remembering the past. They told themselves that enough time, enough distance, or enough activity would settle everything. But the important thing that just happened has made those explanations feel incomplete. You see, my beloved child, the heart often knows before the mind is ready to agree. Your soulmate has spent time trying to solve with logic what could only be understood through honesty. They ask themselves questions in private that they would never comfortably answer in front of others. Why does your opinion still matter to them? Why do they still wonder how you are doing? Why do they replay certain moments and notice details they overlooked when those moments were actually happening? Why does the idea of you truly moving forward without them create a feeling they cannot name? And why, after everything they have done to keep control of their emotions, does one unexpected reminder of you have the power to interrupt an entire day? Something happened that forced one of these questions to the surface. Someone may have spoken about love, loyalty, regret, timing, or the kind of person who becomes difficult to replace. Your soulmate listened, perhaps without saying much. But inside, something began turning. They suddenly saw a memory involving you from another angle. A moment they once dismissed as small became painfully meaningful. Maybe it was the way you stayed gentle when you could have become cold. Maybe it was the way you noticed when something was wrong without demanding an explanation. Maybe it was the way you believed in something good inside them when they were still struggling to believe in it themselves. Whatever the memory was, it did not leave quickly this time. It followed them. And that is where the story begins to change. Because your soulmate did not only remember what you gave. They remembered what they withheld. They remembered a conversation they postponed. A feeling they disguised. A truth they almost told you and then swallowed because the timing felt complicated. They remembered moments when they wanted to move closer but instead protected themselves with distance. For a long time, they believed silence was safer. They believed keeping certain emotions contained would prevent confusion. But now they are beginning to understand the cost of that silence. What protected them temporarily may have also prevented you from knowing something that could have changed the way you understood the connection. My child, this is why the desire to talk to you feels different now. It is not simply, "I miss you." It is not merely, "I have been thinking about you." The words forming inside them go deeper. They want to explain a part of their behavior that never made complete sense from your side. They want to tell you why they hesitated at a moment when you expected clarity. They want to admit what was happening internally while externally they may have appeared calm, uncertain, distant, distracted, or difficult to read. And there is one particular truth they have been afraid to say because saying it would require them to stop hiding behind the version of themselves that always needs to appear in control. Stay with this, because what changed was not only their feeling toward you. Something changed in the way they see their own choices. There was a time when your soulmate believed they could delay important emotional decisions indefinitely. They thought there would always be another opportunity to speak. Another day. Another opening. Another moment when circumstances would feel perfect. But life recently showed them how quickly a season can change. They saw something end, move, shift, or become unavailable in someone else's life, and it awakened a quiet fear. Not the fear of punishment, but the fear of waiting so long that honesty becomes useless. They suddenly understood that people do not remain frozen in place while someone gathers courage. Hearts evolve. Lives continue. Doors that stay open for a long time can eventually close without anger, simply because a person has learned to keep walking. When this understanding reached your soulmate, your name came to mind. That surprised them. They were not deliberately thinking about you. They were not sitting down to analyze your connection. Yet there you were, appearing at the exact point where regret and possibility met. And for a few seconds, your soulmate imagined a future in which you had completely stopped wondering about them. They imagined you becoming peaceful without needing their explanation. They imagined someone else recognizing your value without hesitation. They imagined hearing that you were happy and realizing they no longer had the right to interrupt that happiness with words they should have spoken earlier. The thought affected them more deeply than they expected. This is where heaven's fictional message becomes intimate, my child, not because you are being told to wait for anyone, but because the story unfolding here is about what happens when someone finally realizes that another person's presence was never guaranteed. Your soulmate is facing the uncomfortable truth that genuine connection cannot be preserved through silence alone. If they value what existed between you, they must eventually become brave enough to communicate. They cannot expect you to interpret every pause, every glance, every almost message, every unexplained retreat. Love without honesty becomes a maze, and your soulmate is tired of wandering through one they helped create. There is something they want to tell you about the past. But before they can say it, they are wrestling with one question: will you believe them? That question has been following them. They know some of their behavior may have given you reasons to doubt what they felt. They know there may have been times when their actions seemed to contradict the depth they privately carried. They understand that feelings are easy to claim after the fact. What matters is whether they are willing to own their choices without excuses. And this is exactly why their internal conversation has become so intense. They are not merely rehearsing romantic words. They are trying to find the courage to speak with accountability. Your soulmate has started replaying the moment when things began to change between you. Not the obvious moment, the deeper one. The moment fear entered where openness had once been possible. Perhaps they became overwhelmed by how quickly the connection began to matter. Perhaps they carried old disappointment from another chapter of life and unknowingly placed those fears into something new. Perhaps they were afraid that if you saw how deeply they cared, you would gain the power to hurt them. Perhaps they convinced themselves they needed more certainty before they could be vulnerable. Whatever the reason, they now see that protection and avoidance are not the same thing, even though they once confused them. And there is another layer. Someone recently reflected something back to your soulmate that they did not expect to hear. It may have been a friend, relative, colleague, or even a stranger speaking generally about relationships. The person may not have mentioned you at all. But what they said struck a hidden nerve. They described the difference between someone who creates excitement and someone who creates peace. They spoke about the rare person who sees beyond appearances. They spoke about how people sometimes chase what is complicated while taking what is sincere for granted. And while listening, your soulmate became unusually quiet. Because they thought of you. Not the perfect version of you. Not a fantasy. You, as they experienced you. Your imperfections. Your boundaries. Your warmth. The moments when you did not always understand each other. The way you could be strong and sensitive at the same time. The way your presence seemed to call something more honest out of them. Your soulmate realized that what they once labeled intense may actually have been the discomfort of being genuinely seen. That realization has changed the words they now want to say. My beloved child, there are conversations people rehearse 100 times before they ever happen. Your soulmate has begun having one of those conversations with you in their imagination. They picture how you might respond. They wonder whether you will be surprised, cautious, quiet, emotional, or simply calm. They imagine saying your name, then pausing because the first sentence feels harder than everything that follows. They imagine admitting, "There is something I should have told you sooner." And each time they reach that point in their mind, another memory rises to the surface. One memory has become especially difficult to ignore. It was a moment when you gave them an opening. You may not even remember doing it. Perhaps you asked a sincere question. Perhaps you looked at them in a way that made honesty possible. Perhaps you sent a message that invited them to speak freely. Perhaps you offered reassurance without knowing what they were struggling to say. Your soulmate remembers that opening now, and they remember what they did with it. They hesitated. They changed the subject. They minimized what they felt. They answered carefully instead of truthfully. At the time, they told themselves it was necessary. Now they wish they had been braver. This regret is not destroying them. It is awakening them. There is a difference. Regret that only produces shame keeps a person frozen. But regret that produces clarity can lead to transformation. Your soulmate is standing somewhere between those two places. They can continue repeating the old pattern, or they can finally say what they mean. This is why the energy around this fictional story feels urgent without being fearful. The urgency comes from emotional maturity arriving later than expected. They are beginning to understand that meaningful relationships require risk. Not reckless risk. Honest risk. The risk of being misunderstood. The risk of hearing an answer they cannot control. The risk of saying something true without knowing what the other person will do with it. And strangely, your soulmate is becoming more willing to take that risk. Something about what happened recently made the old silence feel heavier than the possibility of rejection. Think about that. For a long time, rejection was what they feared most. Now what they fear more is never knowing what could have happened if they had simply been honest. That shift is enormous. They are not suddenly fearless. Their mind is still creating reasons to wait. They still wonder whether the timing is wrong. They still imagine the most awkward possible outcome. They still tell themselves perhaps you no longer care. But underneath every excuse is a stronger voice asking, and what if you do? What if you have also felt that something was left unfinished? What if you never needed perfection from them, only truth? What if the conversation they have delayed could bring understanding even if neither of you knows yet what comes after it? My child, sometimes closure and beginning stand at the same doorway. You do not know which one you are entering until the conversation begins. Your soulmate senses this. That is why they are approaching the idea of speaking to you differently now. They are no longer trying to control the entire outcome before they make the first move. They are trying to prepare themselves to be honest enough to let the outcome reveal itself. This is new for them. It may sound simple, but for someone who has spent a long time managing emotions privately, it is a profound internal change. And there is one sentence they are struggling to say more than all the others. It is not, "I love you." It is not, "I miss you." It is not, "I made a mistake." The sentence is more vulnerable because it reveals what was happening beneath everything else. They want to tell you that at one point, they were afraid of how important you were becoming. Yes, my beloved child. That is closer to the hidden center of this story. Your soulmate may have acted uncertain not because they felt nothing, but because they began feeling something they did not know how to carry. When a connection touches an old wound, people do not always move closer. Sometimes they move away. Sometimes the possibility of losing something valuable becomes so frightening that they sabotage their chance to experience it fully. They tell themselves they are being cautious. They call it timing. They call it needing space. They call it confusion. But beneath those words, there can be a simple truth: this matters enough to scare me. Your soulmate is beginning to recognize this pattern in themselves. And what recently happened made that recognition unavoidable. They saw someone else choose courage where they had chosen avoidance. Perhaps they witnessed a sincere apology. Perhaps they heard someone admit a feeling without knowing whether it would be returned. Perhaps they watched two people repair something through a conversation that could easily have remained unspoken. Whatever they witnessed, it created a strange ache inside them because they suddenly imagined themselves doing the same with you. For the first time, the conversation did not feel impossible. It felt necessary. They began thinking not only about what they wanted to say but about what they needed to hear from you. And surprisingly, they realized they are not looking for a promise. They are looking for truth. They want to know how you experienced them. They want to know whether their distance hurt you more than they understood. They want to know whether there were times you almost gave up trying to understand what they could not explain. They want to know whether something real still exists beneath the confusion, or whether this chapter has already taught you what it needed to teach. This is a humbler desire than the one they carried before. Before, they wanted certainty without vulnerability. Now they are beginning to understand that vulnerability must come first. There is another reason this matters, my child. Your soulmate has recently been forced to confront the difference between people who know them socially and the person who seem to sense them emotionally. Around others, they may know exactly how to behave. They can laugh, talk, work, perform, distract, and appear perfectly composed. But with you, there were moments when the mask became difficult to maintain. You noticed pauses. You noticed changes in tone. You noticed when their smile did not fully reach their eyes. You may not always have known what was wrong, but your presence seemed to make them aware of the parts of themselves they usually ignored. At one time, this made them uncomfortable. Now they understand why. Being seen can feel threatening to someone who has survived by hiding. Your soulmate is realizing that you were not trying to expose their weakness. You were inviting their honesty. That distinction has stayed with them. They remember a particular moment when you responded with more understanding than they expected. Perhaps they were distant, moody, guarded, or difficult to reach, and instead of immediately attacking them, you gave them space while still showing care. They may not have thanked you. They may not even have acknowledged it properly. But they remember it now. And the memory is changing the way they interpret your role in their life. What they once saw as simply, someone I have feelings for, is becoming something deeper, someone before whom I could have become more honest. This is why the conversation they want now is not casual. They know if they speak to you, certain truths can no longer remain hidden. And one of those truths involves a decision they nearly made. Stay close to this part, because this is where the situation becomes more unexpected. There was a moment, perhaps recently, perhaps after a long period of uncertainty, when your soulmate considered fully closing the emotional door. They thought maybe the best thing was to stop looking back, stop wondering, stop hoping for clarity, and force themselves into a cleaner future. They may have told themselves this would be mature. They may have decided they needed to detach. They may even have tried to create a new routine or redirect their attention. For a while, they believed it was working. Then something happened. And the emotional door they thought they had closed swung open again. It was not because you chased them. It was not because someone pressured them. It was because reality presented them with a truth they could no longer argue against. They discovered that moving forward physically is not the same as resolving something emotionally. Your soulmate realized that they had been trying to finish a chapter they had never actually read aloud. There were unanswered questions inside it. There were unsaid words inside it. There was an apology inside it. And there was one confession they had been avoiding because it would reveal just how much your connection changed them. That confession is connected to what happened recently. Someone asked your soulmate a question. A simple question. The kind people answer quickly without thinking. But your soulmate could not answer quickly. The question was something like this: when was the last time you felt completely understood by someone? And your soulmate froze. Not visibly enough for everyone to notice. Maybe only for a second. But internally, everything went quiet. Because the answer came immediately. You. They tried to search for another answer. Another name. Another memory. But your presence arrived first. And that was the moment they knew they had a problem they could no longer solve by ignoring it. Because missing attention is one thing. Missing chemistry is another. But missing the experience of being understood reaches deeper. Your soulmate walked away from that moment carrying a strange mixture of warmth and regret. Warmth because the memory of you still felt safe in a way they had not expected. Regret because they began wondering whether they ever made you feel equally understood. That question has changed them. They have started examining your connection from your side. This may be the first time they have done it with complete honesty. They are asking themselves what their silence may have communicated to you. Did you think they did not care? Did you think you imagined the connection? Did you eventually convince yourself that the meaningful moments between you meant more to you than they meant to them? Did you begin questioning your own intuition because they were too guarded to confirm what was happening? These thoughts are difficult for your soulmate because they know there were times when you deserved clearer communication. And here is the part they are still processing: they never wanted you to feel unimportant. Yet their fear may have made you feel exactly that. This realization has humbled them. It has also made them want to speak before more time passes. My beloved child, do not mistake this story as a command to wait, chase, or build your life around someone else's awakening. The deeper message is that genuine connection must eventually become mutual in action, not only intense in imagination. Your soulmate is being brought face to face with that truth. If they want a meaningful place in your life, they must show up with clarity. If they need forgiveness, they must be willing to acknowledge what happened. If they want another chance at understanding, they must stop expecting you to decode silence. And they know it. That is what makes this moment so different. Something inside your soulmate has matured beyond the desire to simply be missed. They want to be known. And they want you to know them accurately. Not through assumptions. Not through fragments. Not through the confusing version of themselves they showed you when fear was making decisions. They want to tell you why they disappeared emotionally at certain moments. Why they almost reached out more than once. Why they watched from a distance when part of them wanted to step closer. Why certain conversations ended too quickly. Why they remembered details they pretended to forget. Why your name still carries a weight they cannot explain to anyone else without telling the entire story. Most of all, they want to tell you what happened after that recent moment of realization. Because they did something afterward that surprised even them. They went back. Not necessarily to you physically. They went back through memories. Messages. Moments. Words. They searched their own past for the exact point where they stopped being honest with themselves. And they found it. They found the moment. They found the reason. And when they finally admitted the truth about why they pulled away, another truth surfaced beneath it, one they had never fully allowed themselves to say. For several minutes, they sat with that realization in complete silence. Then they picked up their phone. Your name was there. Their hand hovered. They began typing. Stopped. Deleted it. Started again. This time the message was longer. More honest. They wrote a sentence they had never written to you before. They stared at it, reading it again and again, because once those words reached you, the old version of this connection could never fully return. And just as they were about to decide whether to send it, something unexpected happened that changed the entire meaning of what they were about to tell you.